Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. Hide the kids, hide the children, because we are talking about the West Regional, which, of course, has the single most interesting draw at the bottom half of the bracket. That is right. St. John's, facing the winner of St. John's facing the winner of Arkansas, Kansas. We'll get to that in a minute. Before we do, though, let's start at the top of the bracket. Florida, the number one seed out west. That's ultimately not that big of a surprise to me. Florida, listen, I actually think, I'll be real. I think if there was anyone that had an argument for being the number one overall seed outside of Auburn, I actually thought it was Florida. More quad one wins than Duke. I know Duke had that great win against Auburn earlier in the season, but guess what? Florida beat Auburn at Auburn. And so I'm not surprised. Listen, we've talked about it for years. I do think, and I hate to say it, what you do on Sunday of conference tournaments, I don't think matters as much as it should. And so I just bring it up because I'm not surprised that Florida is the number one overall seed. By the way, I had my buddy Dan Byer, who hosts Fox Sports Radio with me. He brought up the good point. Whoever makes this West Regional final in San Francisco could be a lot of empty seats. Only two teams in the Mountain Time Zone, 0 in the Pacific Time Zone, are even in this region. So a lot of good tickets available. Florida faces Norfolk State. The 8-9 game, you talk about an interesting one. UConn versus Oklahoma. This is fascinating, okay? So UConn was projected to be an 8 seed in Raleigh, but everybody assumed it was going to be against Duke, Duke being the 1 seed. Instead, they face Florida. That's if they get by Oklahoma. I'll be real. I think this is actually a kind of a nice matchup for Oklahoma. They're very athletic. They're pretty physical. They're certainly battle-tested. The big matchup here will be Hassan Diarra, who I believe is an underrated athletic point guard. He'll have to guard Jeremiah Fears. You're talking about a 6th-year senior in college basketball against a true freshman that reclassified. I don't have it in front of me, but I would think that Hassan Diarra has to be one of the older players in college basketball going up against one of the youngest players in college basketball in Jeremiah Fears. So that will be the interesting matchup there. Going to the 5-12 game, I'll say this. 2 things stand out. One, Memphis. Listen, let me say this. I think the committee screwed up a lot of these seedings. I want to go ahead and give the committee credit, though, for Memphis, okay? Because with Memphis, I think it would be very easy to sit there and say that they play in this terrible conference. Most of the bracketologies had them as an 8 or so seed. I am happy that Memphis was rewarded for playing just an insane out-of-conference schedule. For those of you who don't remember, this is who Memphis beat in the out-of-conference. They beat Missouri. We know Missouri's pretty good NCAA tournament team. They beat UConn in Maui. They beat Michigan State, the Big Ten regular season champs. In the out-of-conference, they won at Clemson. Remember, Duke lost at Clemson. Kentucky lost at Clemson. Memphis won there. Memphis also beats Virginia. They beat Ole Miss at home. And so I thought just because the league was so bad, they were going to be punished. But let's give the committee credit for not punishing them, putting them as a 5 seed. What's going to be interesting, we've talked about it. Their starting point guard, Tyrese Hunter, was in a boot, hurt his foot in the semifinal win on Saturday. They played UAB in the title game and won without him. We will see. It's going to be tough for them to make a real run without Tyrese Hunter. So we'll see if we get any updates. Colorado State, of course, is the Mountain West tournament champ. I'll tell you this. Colorado State's playing about as well as anybody in college basketball right now. The advanced analytics say they're like a top 15 or so team over the last month of the regular season. But they won, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games going into the conference tournament, 7 straight going into the conference tournament. They beat Nevada. They destroyed Utah State. Now, they won by 9, but I watched that game. They were up by 20 most of the second half, and then they win by double figures against Boise in the title game. And so Colorado State's playing about as well as anybody. I think that is a fascinating matchup in that region, and I think it'll be a great matchup if you're a fan of college basketball. That is a 2 p.m. Eastern start and that is on Friday. Really quickly, the 4-13 matchup, Maryland. I think Maryland is a wildly underrated team throughout the season. Lost at basically the buzzer in the conference championship game. They're facing Grand Canyon. Grand Canyon ain't afraid of nobody. Remember, Grand Canyon last year as a 12 seed beat St. Mary's in the opening round. I think everybody knows their story, but Tyon Grant Foster is a guy that a lot of people think has NBA potential. Started his career in the Big 12 at Kansas, averaged 20 a game last year, decided to come back for one more season, averaged 14 and a half this year. Jacoby Coles, who began his career at TCU, is averaging about 15 points per game. So they got some dudes, high major dudes in that on that team. Bottom half of the bracket. This is the one with a lot of upset potential, and this is the one everyone's going to be talking about. Missouri versus Drake. Okay, so Missouri out of the SEC. They struggled down the stretch. They did win their SEC tournament opener, ended up losing to Florida in the semifinals. No shame there. I think what's interesting, this is a fascinating clash of styles. Okay, what Missouri wants to do is force you into a million turnovers. They want to play fast. They want to make you uncomfortable. Drake plays super slow. And how about this? Drake going into the NCAA tournament is one of the best teams in the country in terms of turnovers. They just take care of the basketball really well. And so I look at that Drake team, and I think that could, in theory, be a tough matchup for Missouri because they're going to make sure that they don't do what Missouri wants them to do, which is turn the ball over. So that is a fascinating matchup to me. Drake is top 50 in the country in turnover margin. In other words, turnovers that they force versus turnovers that they whatever. And I just think that is going to be a very interesting matchup. I think that's going to be a fascinating matchup in that region. Texas Tech over against Wilmington. Listen, Wilmington's a great story. Texas Tech is awesome. They've been dealing with a few injuries. Darian Williams has been in on a lineup. I think Texas Tech rolls there. Now, let's get to the bottom half of this bracket. Arkansas, Kansas. Arkansas, Kansas, baby. So listen, what is there to say? I mean, what is there to say? Arkansas, Kansas, Self versus Calipari. I mentioned it earlier. These two teams played in a charity exhibition. To say that those two teams are a little bit different than when they played. By the way, Boogie Fland played in that game. Apparently, Boogie Fland is coming back for the NCAA tournament. Listen, I'll be real. I think I like Arkansas. Arkansas needs, I haven't listened to Coach Cal's availabilities yet, but I think it's kind of worth noting, I just think that you look at Arkansas, what is the status of all these? It's been said publicly, but he was clearly nothing close to 100%. But I do think more bodies, the better. So Arkansas versus Kansas, I think it'll be interesting. Kansas has been kind of a whipping boy all season long. Kansas has been a team that, in theory, to me, is a team that has the capability to play really well, but not play well. Lost to Arizona, easily could have lost to UCF in the conference championship, in the conference tournament. So I'm very curious about Kansas. Winner, so St. John's plays Omaha. I think St. John's is going to be okay against Omaha. We'll get back to the bottom half of the bracket. Florida against either UConn or Oklahoma. I don't think that's the spot where Florida gets upset. First of all, Florida played Oklahoma earlier this year in SEC play. They played way back about 3 weeks ago. Oklahoma lost by 22 points. Florida was up by 22 at the half and basically cruised from there. I've said this about UConn time and time again. Listen, I'm a Husky. Everybody knows it. But I think we also have to be honest about this team. And I just think they're very limited. I think if they even survive Oklahoma, which I'm not sure that they will, I think that I don't think this is you can't bet against UConn because of Hurley and because of no. I think they are very limited in what they do. I think Florida would cruise past that game. Memphis versus Maryland, if we get it, I think will be phenomenal. Again, the story with Memphis is just the status of Tyrese Hunter. He is so important to what they do. Second or third leading scorer, leading assist guy, starting point guard, fifth-year guy. We just got to figure out his status. Bottom half of the bracket, I could see Drake upsetting Missouri, Texas Tech, I think they're just a quiet team. I think you look at Texas Tech, and I think it could be one of those scenarios where you just sit there and say, like, oh man, like, you just blink and they're in the Sweet 16 and you don't really remember anything from the opening weekend. I'll say this. I do like Arkansas to beat Kansas. I don't know that I can pick Arkansas to beat St. John's, but what I will tell you is this. This is the one matchup that Rick Pitino didn't want. Now, to be clear, I don't think John Calipari wanted it either, but what I will say, listen, let me even say this. I know we got a lot of St. John's fans that listen to the show. We appreciate your support, okay? This is not a knock on Rick Pitino. I think he's the godfather. I think he's unbelievable. But what I will also say is this. We talked earlier, I'll say, let me backtrack. Pitino. I did the whole segment a few weeks ago, the argument of, could you actually make the argument that he's the GOAT? I bring it up because if you want to make the argument that he's the GOAT, 6 NCAA tournaments with 6 different teams, 5 conference championships with 5 different teams. But there was also about a decade where Calipari owned him, okay? And so I don't know that Arkansas has quite enough, but both these teams are kind of the same. They're not super skilled offensively. They're very physical. I think the length of Arkansas, if Big Z can play with Trevin Brazil, with Big Z, with Jonas Adu, I think it could give St. John's problems. The question is, can Arkansas even get by Kansas? So this is a fascinating draw. I'll tell you this, I don't think it's the worst draw for Arkansas. This is a team that St. John's would not want to have seen. I don't know that I'm ready to pick the upset yet, but I think we could get there. Florida, Texas Tech, I think all these teams can advance. And I just think it's going to be a fun bracket. I know I said I liked Auburn in the other bracket to advance pretty easily. I think Florida, right matchup with Memphis, could lose. I think Florida with the right but I would have trouble not having Florida minimum Sweet 16, maybe beyond. By the way, Florida, I heard, got the kiss of death on the ESPN bracket show. Was told that every analyst on set picked Florida to win the national championship, so that's a little bit concerning. But obviously, they are good to go.